So, today we're going to get into a really fundamental question. How do we actually measure something as huge as gender equality around the world? It can't just be about feelings or what we think we see. We need cold, hard data. Yeah, let's just ask it straight up. How equal is our world? Really? It sounds like a simple question, right? But man, the answer is so complex. You've got places making huge strides, and then you see these just shocking gaps elsewhere. So, to really get to the bottom of it, you need the right tool for the job. And that tool, the one we're going to unpack today, is the Gender Development Index, or GDI for short. The best way to think about it is like a magnifying glass. It takes something you might have heard of, the Human Development Index, or HDI, which is just a country's overall report card, and it splits it right down the middle. It gives us one score for women and another for men. And boom, right there, the gender gap comes into crystal clear focus. All right, so let's get under the hood a bit. How does this thing actually work? What's it even measuring? Okay, so it really boils down to three fundamental things, three pillars of what it means to have a good life. First up, health. Pretty simple. Are you able to live a long and healthy life? Second is knowledge, right? Do you have access to education, to learning? And third, and this one's key, is having a decent standard of living. And what that really means is having control over your own economic resources. So to make this less abstract, the GDI looks at specific numbers. For health, it's all about life expectancy at birth. For education, it's looking at two things. How many years of school can you expect to get, and how many have you actually gotten? And for that standard of living piece, it all comes down to money, the estimated gross national income per person. And when you compare those numbers between men and women, well, that's when you get a really powerful snapshot of what inequality looks like on the ground. Okay, so theory is one thing, but let's see how this plays out in the real world, right? Let's get our hands dirty with some actual data. We're going to start at the very top with a country that consistently nails it when it comes to human development. And our first stop is Iceland. Now, they're ranked number 1 in the world for overall human development. So you'd think, okay, this has got to be a place with near-perfect gender equality, right? Well, let's just say the data tells a much more interesting story. Okay, so when you look at Iceland's numbers, something jumps out at you right away. It's the contrast. Check this out. In health and education, women are actually ahead. They live longer, and they're expected to get more schooling. It's almost like a reverse gender gap. But then your eye drifts down to that last row, the income. And this chart just lays it all out there. Look at the difference between those two bars. It's wild. Even though women are leading the charge in health and education, their estimated annual income is almost $25,000 less than men's. So even in the number 1 country, there's this huge, persistent economic gap. Okay, so that's the view from the top. Now let's use this GDI lens to see how the story changes when we look at completely different parts of the world. And trust me, the contrast is pretty shocking. So we're going to do a direct comparison. On one hand, you've got Switzerland, another one of those top-tier countries in human development. And on the other, Yemen, a nation facing just incredible challenges right now. Let's start with Switzerland, and you're going to see a familiar pattern here, a lot like Iceland. Women live a little longer, they're expected to get a bit more schooling. Those social gaps are pretty much closed. But then, once again, you get to the money. And the gap is just massive. We're talking over $43,000 a year. It's just more proof that even in a super wealthy, highly developed country, economic power is nowhere near equal. Now, keep that image, that gap, right in your head. Because now we're going to turn to Yemen. And here, the whole picture just falls apart. We're not just talking about one gap. We're talking about gaps across the board. Women do still live longer, but look at the schooling. Way, way fewer years expected for them. And the economic disparity? Well, that's on a whole other planet. Yeah, in relative terms, this isn't a gap, it's a chasm. A woman's estimated income is just a tiny, tiny fraction of a man's. And when you put this right next to the chart from Switzerland, you see the two extremes of the global gender gap, right? On one side, you have a gap in economic power. On the other, you have this deep, profound inequality across almost every part of life. Okay, so let's bring this a little closer to home for a lot of you. Let's take a quick look at the United States, which comes in at number 17 overall. And surprise, surprise, we see that same pattern.
women live longer. But that economic story, it's the same one we saw in other highly developed countries. There is a very big gap in estimated income. Let's just put that number on its own so we can really see it. $27,000. Well, almost. That's the estimated income gap in the US every single year. It's just a really stark figure, and it proves that this isn't some problem that's happening over there. It is a persistent, stubborn issue right across the developed world. Okay, so we've zoomed in on a few countries. Now let's zoom back out. What's the global takeaway here? What is all this data from the Gender Development Index really telling us about the world we live in? It really comes down to three big things. First, there's some good news. In a lot of places, we are so close to closing the gap on basic health and education. That's huge. But, and this is the second point, the biggest, most stubborn, hardest to fix gap pretty much everywhere, it's economic. And that leads us to the final and maybe the most important point. That command over economic resources is the #1 hurdle standing in the way of real gender equality today. At the end of the day, what the GDI shows us with such brutal clarity is that social progress isn't enough on its own. It's fantastic. It's a huge achievement that women's health and education levels are so high in many places. But that achievement doesn't automatically, magically translate into equal economic power. And so that leaves us with the really big question, doesn't it? The data lays it all out. It shows us exactly where the gaps are. We know where we stand. The real challenge now is, what's it going to take to finally close them for good? What policies, what cultural changes have to happen to get us there?